we've been talking about over the past 2 weeks is the life of Peter, which is a study that I have interest in, many of you do. We relate to Peter with his unique characteristics, the things that we know about Peter from before Jesus' crucifixion are familiar to each of us, impulsiveness and the things that he does. What I want to do is go back over a couple things that were covered the previous sessions, just to illustrate a couple points that came out to me. Please, if you have any thoughts or comments, I encourage you to share them. You don't need to raise your hand, just blurt it out. By the way, our invitation song is 9:15. Okay, so let's go together to Matthew 14. And this is the familiar story we know. Starts roughly in verse 22, where Jesus is walking on the water. Okay. I'm going to just start reading in 22. Immediately he made the disciples get into the boat and go ahead of him to the other side while he sent the crowds away. After he had sent the crowds away, he went up on the mountain by himself to pray, and when it was evening, he was there alone. But the boat was already a long distance from land. If you, this story is also recounted in John chapter 6. So he's at this point 3 to 4 miles. It says, long distance from land, battered by the waves, for the wind was contrary. And in the fourth watch of the night, he came to them walking on the sea. When the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified and said, "It is a ghost," and they cried out in fear. A lot of our attention in this story has been on the fact that Jesus was performing a miracle, walking on the water. I can't imagine how you would do that. You try to think of it with waves going. Is he keeping with the waves? And then the story about Peter asking him, "Hey, if this is you, ask me to come out there." Like the last thing I would have said. But that's Peter. And but what is often overlooked in this story, and this isn't originally for me, I've heard this from another lesson, is that the Lord didn't just calm the waves for them ahead of time. He didn't calm them for the walk out to the boat. He didn't protect them from the waves and the wind. He allowed them to endure that fear, that strife. That was he was well aware of what they were experiencing. You know that. But he did not protect them from it. He let them go through that. And that's something that, and there are other instances of that. I mean, we can, as we think about it, what's the other instance where they were in a boat and it got rough? Can you remember that one? Well, yeah, Jesus was asleep in the boat, and it was bad. They were scared for their lives, and when he woke up, he calmed the sea for them. But one of the points that in the lesson that I heard was making this point is that God's going to, and Jesus, in his time here, allowed them to go through difficult times. He allowed them to endure stress, fear, uncertainty, and he did not always give them. He didn't take those things away, and he didn't give them all of the answers that they wanted. Not right away. think that's, for me, as I read through this lesson, and as I read through the life of Peter in general, these are things that come back to me and remind me as we just go through life, the times where we are enduring a stress, where we have to go through something that's very difficult, and we're wondering, all we can see is what we're immersed in at the time. But God knows what you're dealing with, and he knows what he's going to see in you at the other end of it. Okay, so that other reference for this isn't necessarily about Peter. That's Matthew 8:23 was where Jesus was asleep in the boat. So getting back to Peter. Peter's behavior could be characterized as impulsive. Think of the way Peter responded during the Transfiguration when he saw Jesus and the two prophets with him. He was quick to offer up something that he believed was favorable and desired. When he walked on the water here in Matthew, when he asked to walk on the water here in Matthew 14, that's an impulse. He's like, okay, I'm ready to do this. And then what we're going to see coming up, let's turn now to Matthew 26. And starting with verse 31.
Verse 31. Then Jesus said to them, all of you will fall away on account of me this night, for it is written, I will strike the shepherd, and the sheep of the flock shall be scattered. How far do you want?
Okay. I was going to read up through 35. So
Okay.
yes, thanks.
But after I've risen, I will go before you to Galilee. Peter answered, though all men will fall away on the account of you, yet I will never fall away. Jesus said to him, truly I say to you, this night, before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times. Peter said to him, though should I die with you, yet I will not deny you. And all the disciples spoke in this manner.
Okay. So, how would you characterize Peter's response to Jesus?
Confident.
Yeah, very confident.
At the time, he was willing to do that.
That at that time, he believed that that's how he would respond to that kind of a challenge. He believed, and he was, and we see that he doesn't. At least it doesn't describe him taking a beat to think about his answer before he gives it. At least I'm not. If you read it differently, let me know. But it seems to me he's pretty quick and sure of himself in the way he answers Jesus when Jesus is telling him something about the future. So what is interesting is that because we're gonna tonight, I expect to get to it, start to see Peter change the person he is, start to change his characteristics, and it's not easy to become a different person than you are, and Peter is very much consistently this person that we've been reading until we start reading about it in Acts. Okay, so that's 31 through 35. We know what happens after that. He ends up denying Jesus, and he goes away and weeps about having denied him. Okay, now here's another one. John 18:10. You don't have to turn to that, actually, I'll just talk about it. This is when they are waiting for Jesus to be arrested. And they've prayed, Jesus has prayed, asking the Father to take this cup away. Finally, the Judas and the others show up, and they have a brief exchange, and not long into this, what happens? And Peter's the one who does it. Takes a sword, cuts off the chief priest's slave's ear. And only John is the one that names Peter. The other three Gospels say one of them, but it was Peter that did it. Again, something that is impulsive. So that is, he did not, he kind of took matters into his own hands and acted on his own authority. And that is a component of impulsiveness, is that you have kind of put yourself in the driver's seat and made a decision, a unilateral decision, and acted on that. And that's what Peter does in this instance, and that's not what Jesus wanted. Okay. Let's see, where are we at now? I'm going to go back. I'm going to go to Luke. Let's go to Luke 22. And we'll just go over this briefly. Luke 22:55 through 62. This is the story of Peter denying Jesus. And I'm not going to read all of this. It's also referenced in Mark 14:66 through 72. We know that it happens exactly the way Jesus describes it. Peter does deny Jesus 3 times, and on the third time, he says, "Man, I do not know what you're talking about." This is verse 60. Immediately, while he was still speaking, a rooster crowed. The Lord turned and looked at Peter, and Peter remembered the word of the Lord, how he had told him, "Before a rooster crows today, you will deny me 3 times." And he went out and wept bitterly. So we're seeing Peter beginning to experience some of the consequences of the decisions that he's made in the past, the decisions to follow Jesus, to stay with Jesus through difficult times. And he's trying to follow through with those, believing that he's making good decisions. But this is an example here where he can't deny that what he said to Jesus was completely wrong, and he was proven wrong. And can you imagine Jesus looking at you when it happens? Oh boy, yeah, that'd be mortifying. Oh, okay. All right. So the next thing I wanted to go to in the life of Peter is we know that he's one of the ones that ran to the tomb when the apostles were told that Jesus had risen from the dead. Also, let's go look at John 21. invites, somebody would like to read John 21, 15 through 17.
When they had finished breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? And he said to him, Yes, Lord, you know that I love you. And he said to him, Feed my lambs. And he said a second time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? And he said to him, Yes, Lord, you know that I love you. He said to him, Tend my sheep. He said to him a third time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Peter was grieved because he had said to him the third time, Do you love me? And he said to him, Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you. And Jesus said to him, Feed my sheep. How far did you want me to read?
That's good for right now. What I wanted to do is remind us of what Jesus envisioned in Peter. What does Jesus know about Peter? He knew that he would deny him 3 times. But at the same time, he knows what he has planned for him. And that Peter really did need this kind of a direct restoration or direct forgiveness, if you will, from Jesus for what he had done after behaving the way he did during his arrest. So this is, just to me, an example of how God does take care of us. It's a reminder of his comfort, knowing he's with us through the trials that he lets us endure, that he's going to be there for us because he knows why you're enduring that trial. He knows where you're going to be at the other end of that trial and what his purpose is in letting you go through that and how it will change you. And the trials that we go through do that. They change us and change us in a way that makes us stronger and grows our faith. So I'll just read verse 18. Truly, truly, I say to you, when you were younger, you used to gird yourself and walk wherever you wished. But when you grow old, you will stretch out your hands, and someone else will gird you and bring you where you do not wish to go. And so he spends time with Peter, and Peter's restored, and so the next time we see Peter is going to be in Acts, and in a very much different capacity and a different Peter. Okay, any thoughts about this up to this point?
I think it's an example for us today at what Peter went through when Christ told him he was announcing 3 times, and as it states that Peter, he left and he wept bitterly. We look at ourselves as servants of Christ, and not to say that it would happen to any one of us, but it could. It could. I think it's a very good thing that we can learn from, an example of what happened to Peter. And then look at what he had in store for Peter later. Now, I wonder if he was actually building Peter up. I think he was.
Yeah, and so you reminded me, I was almost going to skip this. If you would turn to 1 Peter. 1 Peter chapter 2. And for those online that try to summarize your comment, that the trials Peter was going through was preparing him for what he was about to encounter with the new church, the Lord's church. Okay, 1 Peter 2, and I'm going to start in verse 18. Servants, be submissive to your masters with all respect, not only to those who are good and gentle, but also to those who are unreasonable. For this finds favor if, for the sake of conscience towards God, a person bears up under sorrows when suffering unjustly. Okay, I'll stop there briefly. Here's a verse where Peter is telling us that God will, he's aware that you are bearing a burden. In this case, it's someone who is being unreasonable with you, and we've all encountered that in jobs and other circumstances. But what's really challenging is when those things happen, say in a work environment, we often are compelled to want to either defend ourselves or stand ground or something like that to provide some resistance to that unjust, unreasonable behavior. And that's our impulse to do that. But what Peter says here, he says, be submissive to your masters with all respect, not only to those who are good and gentle, but also to those who are unreasonable. For this finds favor if, for the sake of conscience toward God, a person bears up under sorrows when suffering unjustly. For what credit is there if, when you sin and are harshly treated, you endure it with patience? But if, when you do what is right and suffer for it, you patiently endure it, this finds favor with God. For you have been called for this purpose, since Christ also suffered for you, leaving you an example for you to follow in his steps. I admit I had to read that one several times over years to really understand what Peter was trying to say and what that meant to me. Because there are many times in our lives we know we're suffering. We're suffering perhaps by an unjust master. We're suffering from a health circumstance. We're suffering financially in some way, or maybe there's some strife in the church. But what we don't often think of is the fact that we are Christians. We are where we are because of the decisions we have made to follow Christ. And if you think back over your life from the time that you have obeyed the gospel up until now, the decisions you make are directed and guided by your faith and your belief. So as you're going through life with those decisions, trying to serve God, to be a good Christian, and you encounter suffering, you are suffering for Christ. Now, you don't always think of it that way, like, oh no, I'm suffering because so somebody just got aggravated in traffic or whatever, I got sick because I didn't eat right or something like that. But what this is telling us is that God will allow you to endure suffering for his purpose, and he's telling us that is our purpose. Let me read that again. When you do what is right and suffer for it, you patiently endure it. This finds favor with God. For you have been called for this purpose, since Christ also suffered for you, leaving you an example for you to follow in his steps. Okay, thoughts? Agree? Disagree? Yes, sir.
I was thinking about it. Our battle, the Bible talks about the battle being against Satan, not flesh and blood. And it's hard to, self-preservation is important to us. We like to think of ourselves mostly that we're important to ourselves. And Satan's always knocking on the door. And, you know, and we want to retaliate, like you were saying, bro. And it's like, it's tough sometimes fighting your sinful nature, you know, it's tough. But we all go through it. I'm sure there's not a person in this room that has not gone through those trials. It's crummy.
And God has allowed those things to transpire to
Absolutely.
you. He knows it, he's allowed it, yes, sir.
Well, it's just like, an example for me that I think about is a certain passage. As Christ endured for us, and look at all that he endured for each one of us. And in our Christian walk, in our faith, that we should practice every day. Whether it be a pastor, whether it be a friend, whether it be a family member, if we're doing wrong. You know, back before we are who we are today, you'd always want, you gotta be up on, I can't let this happen. Well, why don't we do just like the Bible tells us to do, just take it. That's where I'm going with it.
That is hard, to just take it, but that's what he's asking us to do. And that was, and we are called for that purpose, to take it, but, and when we do, that's not happening in a vacuum. It's being observed by those around us, those who know us, those that we work with or interact with in church or wherever, in school, that your obedience and frankly, your unusual behavior, gets their attention. It does make a difference. Any other thoughts before we move along from that one? Okay. Let's see. All right, so let me get back to my outline here. Brian kindly provided me with an outline that I have, you know, all but busted because I haven't really gotten started. Okay, still got a few minutes, good. Let's see our first one here. Let's go to Acts chapter 2. Okay, so this is a familiar setting for most of us, where the day of Pentecost, I'll start reading verse 1. When the day of Pentecost had come, they were all together in one place. And suddenly there came from heaven a noise like a violent rushing wind, and it filled the whole house where they were sitting. There appeared to them tongues as of fire distributing themselves, and they rested on each one of them. And they were all filled with the Holy Spirit and began to speak with other tongues as the Spirit was giving them utterance. So I'm just saying, reading that for a reminder that we know the setting, that this is a gathering where there's these very unusual things happening. This was all prophecy or prophesying. And so in verse 14, we see Peter now in his new capacity for the first time. The Peter that we read about earlier in the Gospels is a different person than the one we're about to read right now. I'll start with 14. But Peter, taking his stand with the 11, raised his voice and declared to them, Men of Judea and all you who live in Jerusalem, let this be known to you and give heed to my words. That's pretty bold. You know, you would not have heard Peter talk like that before. Give heed to my words, for these men are not drunk, as you suppose, for it is only the third hour of the day. But this is what was spoken of through the prophet Joel. And then he goes on to cite scripture. and spend some time. And it shall be in the last days, God says, that I will pour forth my Spirit on all mankind. Okay, so not only is Peter taking the lead in a large group among all the apostles, he's willing to stand up in front of a large group, especially after very strange things have happened, the cause of which is in question or dispute, at least at that time, and then begin to provide authoritative explanation for what has happened, and a scriptural reference to support what he's trying to tell them. So he provides this scripture, and then men of Israel, listen to these words. Jesus the Nazarene, a man attested to you by God with miracles and wonders and signs which God performed through him in your midst, just as you yourself know. This man, delivered over by the predetermined plan and foreknowledge of God, you nailed to a cross by the hands of godless men and put him to death. But God raised him up again. So Peter is preaching the gospel. And he is laying it out without mincing any words, without trying to appease or mitigate the impact of what he's trying to tell them. He did not pull any punches. And that's a Peter that has courage, and that's a Peter that has planned what he was going to say ahead of time. Because he didn't just, pull. I mean, yes, he is speaking through the Holy Spirit is guiding him, but he had to have been familiar with the scripture. All right. Let's see where I'm at. Okay. Now, I did skip a brief thing. I won't spend a lot of time on it. Peter, prior to this, he led the selection of the apostle that would take the place of Judas. And that was Acts 1, 15 through 26. So he had begun sort of a leadership role within that smaller group. This is a different type of leadership that requires different skills and different types of character. All right, let's see where I'm at. Make sure Okay, now one of the things that Brian had asked me to mention about this is that when they gathered in the upper room, and I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to digress here. Back to Acts 1, and this is 13 and 14. When they had entered the city, they went up to the upper room where they were staying. That is Peter and John and James and Andrew, Philip and Thomas, Bartholomew, Matthew, James the son of Alphaeus, Simon the Zealot, Judas the son of James. These all with one mind were continually devoting themselves to prayer, along with the women and Mary, the mother of Jesus, and with his brothers. So the point that we can take from this is as they are preparing for decisions like this is an important decision. They took time to pray together about this, to ask God for guidance and do so carefully, with knowing that God would guide that decision, which he did, and then they ended up selecting Matthias. So the point that I wanted to draw from this is that it's important that when we're taking action, to make sure that we have prepared before we actually engage or execute. Prepare with prayer, go to God, and make sure, I know we don't do this, and I don't do this every time. I make decisions throughout the day that I don't pray about first. But what we learn, I think, as we get older, is we do start to pray more and more as those decisions come along. We start learning, hey, I should have prayed about this. You know, this didn't really go right. I need to remember to pray first. And so that, I think that's an important point. Thank you, Brian, for illustrating that in your outlines for us. Sounds like Dick wants me to quit talking. I guess I will do that. What I didn't get very far into what he had planned. What is up next is, let's see, yes, Acts 3. So mark in your books that we will be in Acts 3 starting next week. And thank you all for your comments and your attention. And remember, our invitation song is 9:15. 9:15. What we often do at this time, Brian leads this normally, is to take prayer requests. Are there any particular I need to? Excuse me. Are there any particular requests that you'd like to bring up? Certainly request. How long are you guys in town for? 26. And then you're all going to different places? Okay, so first of all, first thing we can pray that your work here is impactful and successful, and that you have safe travels. Okay, any other, yes, Elijah.
I would like them legal continuing praying for my friend Greg Thomas. He had a stroke at the age of 42 years old. So his both right side right now is paralyzed.
Age 42 and had a stroke. Okay, where is he?
In South Florida. He's right now with the Jackson Memorial Hospital.
Okay. Other prayer requests?
There's continued prayer for my brother-in-law. He's in hospice care in our family.
Camp director, little baby's been in the hospital and is gravely ill. His name is Phoenix. He's my brother.
He's home now.
Okay. Others? Is that a prayer request? Okay. All right. Still waiting for Tyler's class, yeah, okay. Let's give them a few minutes and, so for those are here, Sunday, Brian has graciously allowed me to take his pulpit time for the sermon, and I'll be sharing with you what the men discussed last Saturday. We had a meeting out in the fellowship hall Saturday morning, and kind of gathered our thoughts, issues, plans, and it was a great discussion. We had a lot of things brought up, and so what I'll do is spend part of the sermon on Sunday sharing that with you. I was the one that took notes, so I'll kind of share what I wrote up, and then after that I'll do a short devotional before we let things out. Okay. All right. So.
Announcements, prayer requests. She'll do the, yeah, invitation. And we've got the invitations on that. And the closing. Yep.
Okay, I'm new at this. I had to ask Tyler what to do. Okay, so let's see the announcements. Next Tuesday, this coming Tuesday, is the third Tuesday of the month. We'll have the food distribution. I'm not sure when is VBS?
VBS is the last day of May and the first 3 days of June. So,
Okay,
yeah, first full week of June.
all right. Any other announcements that? Yes. Or you want to come up and?
I've got plenty.
Why don't you come on up?
So yes. All right. So let me make sure I've got all of these real quick so I can get through them. All right. Let me see. Brian sent me 2 prayer requests that he wanted to make sure I got in. For those who know Larry Polk, he's an elder over in Jacksonville. We got a phone call that he was in critical condition over at the hospital over in St. Augustine. So prayers for his family. We also had a prayer request for Tammy Theus. If those who remember her, her and her husband and their kids were attending church here a couple of years ago. She had a baby Friday morning, if I remember correctly. The baby's doing well, but she's had some blood pressure issues, and so they pretty much had to admit her right back into the hospital. And so keep her and the family in your prayers. Did we talk about VBS supply list, or do I need to give that to everybody? Yes. If you have got things, if you're one of our teachers for VBS and you need supplies, please let me, Brian, or Cheyenne know by March 17th. That way we can get stuff ordered and we have at least 2 more full months to have everything ready to go before VBS. Easter candy. If you would like to bring candy, preferably not chocolate, because as we have found out this week, it's already decided to warm up really, really quickly. Please bring that by the church office at any point in the next couple of weeks. We are good on eggs. We are good on, like I said, we just need the candy for that. And we've got baskets for kids that need baskets. Oh, yes. And I need somebody who would be willing to make dinner next Wednesday night. Because I've got a hand in the back. Y'all got dinner next Wednesday night? Perfect. And we're about to say, I'll get with you so we can figure out what we're doing and then what you need people to bring. Perfect. All right, Brother Bill, that is all the announcements I had. Thank you, sir.
Okay, we generally have a short devo before we close out. Thank you, everybody, for putting up with me in class, and all the teachers for preparing and the hard work that y'all do. It's appreciated very much, and all the turnout and the kids. It's great to see you all here.